Okay, welcome to part 2 of making a challenge lock, and I want to step back for a moment here and point out a couple things. In stitching all those files together and doing the drivers, there was some footage I accidentally left out, and I apologize for that. If it seemed like there was a weird jump in the pins I was doing, I got mixed up when I was stitching everything together. So maybe what we'll end up doing is kind of an appendix, addendum thing, and I'll put some of that other footage in just for people that want to see a more complete picture and all the filing and things like that that I did. I didn't mean to do that, Skip. Sorry about that. But I also want to step back and just show you a couple different approaches to when you're doing one of these. Because the way I'm doing it, it's being dictated by the fact that I wanted to use a really long T-pin. And that's kind of causing some variance in how you might approach this, just depending on where you choose to start at. So I'll take a look at this real quick. I'll just show you a quick demonstration of one of those bits I'm talking about. So I pointed this out in another video I did a while back on creating a challenge lock. Let's say you just had a complete lock. So you've got the whole, the core and the Bible and everything, and it's all pinned up. And you've got the cut key, and you just want to modify this existing lock into a challenge lock. In that case, I take a different approach. What I do is I kind of start by marking this. Let me see if I can drop this into a chamber where it's going to more or less match the shear line. Yeah, okay. So that's pretty close. So we'll say that's that would work for lifting it. So what I would do is I would line up, I'd put the key in, and I would put in all the key pins, and then retract the key and load in my driver. And what you'll end up with is something like that, where the driver, of course, is sticking out a little bit above the shear line. And then what I tend to do, this is the part I pointed out in another video, I come in with a magic marker and I just kind of mark the pin a bit. Then when I go to start making and actually shaping the pins, when I do the driver, what I will do is I will chuck this into the Dremel, covering up a good portion of that black part, but that lets you know how much of the pin is actually going to be fully in play. So you don't end up having to, doing more shaping or anything that's not going to actually affect the lock at all. So that's kind of the way to do it if you've got the complete lock and the key and everything, and you're not going to be worried about having to reform the key or anything like that. The way I'm doing this, it's going to be a little bit of a hybrid because we are using kind of a pre-cut key. Well, yeah, it's got some cuts, not very many. It's not great bitting, and I think it's going to be enough to modify to work for which pins I want to use. Now, for what I'm building, I'm going to have to probably make a few concessions. So we know we've got 3 really long pins, right? And these are probably going to be 0 bitted on the key, most likely, to get as most of them into our core chambers as possible. And again, I can play with the pins a little bit. I do have some wiggle room there. Now, ideally, we've got 2 other shorter, we're going to have some other shorter ones because you want your bitting to be, kind of up and down. And I don't know how much I'm going to get away with on this key. So I'm going to have room there and there for 2 of the really long ones. The third one, I'm probably going to have to go in here because we can't add material to the key. So I may have to cut one of these down, or I may have to cut one of the pins down or do something to make up for it. Now, ideally, I would kind of like one of those 3 long pins to be more in the middle and surrounded by the lesser lifts. So, because what I would like to happen is when you go in to lift one of the longer drivers up and you have to lift it really high, you may accidentally overset one beside it. But I don't think this key is really going to allow us to do that ideally. So, but we're going to make a concession on it. So it's not the ideal of what we want, and sometimes you have to do that. But I think it'll work out all right. Okay, so now what I have to do is find our key pins, and I won't make you sit as I dig through the pound of pins I have sitting here. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look for pins and load them into the chambers that are more or less going to match up with the key as it currently is. And then that'll start to give us a little bit better of a picture of what we're going to have to do, and maybe a good way to arrange them, and we'll start going from there. So I'm going to start digging and we'll be right back. Okay, so we've got a pretty alright match here. Let's see what we've got. And this is just matched to the key as it currently is. So without doing a lot more digging, and maybe I will, our pin 4 really sticks up. Now, we've got a couple choices. We can make that change on the key by just taking more material off the key and dropping that pin down, or we can go with the much sketchier technique of trying to take material off, that little material off of the pin itself. And I might do some more digging, see if I can find one that fits a little better. Otherwise, that's the technique we're going to do. We're actually going to try to take that pin down, because I'm trying to keep the key as much as possible. I don't want to, remember, I'm looking for chamber depth for 3 pins, for 3 driver pins. So the less I do to the key, the better, because as I take off of the key for any of these, it would affect how many options I have for dropping our 3 longer drivers down into the chambers. Now, let's see. Now, see, this one is sticking a little bit, so I may stick him in the Dremel and just take a hair off of him. But let's see where this gets us if we try to load it up. Okay, so our drivers were not laid out in any particular order, and so when I was inserting them in here, all I was looking for was depth. Which of those 3 long ones could I get in there? And you can see we have a good bit of some of these pins not coming into play, which means our key selection is not ideal. Now we've got a few options again. We can go back to the drawing board. I can decide to sacrifice that blank I had been hanging on to for another idea. Or we can commit to some rearranging and refinagling, maybe trying to take some off of the pins or something, and see what we can come up with. I could take off the top of this guy, but I want him to really sink in at least to that little mark there, because as he is, he's not doing what we want him to do. Our long T-pin though, you know, he's wobbly. Wouldn't mind if he was sitting down in there a little deeper. We could definitely take some off the tip, lower him. The other guys I'm kind of okay with. I can live with these 2, the way they're sitting. This guy, I wouldn't mind seeing him a hair deeper. Let's see if we shuffle these guys around a little bit. Not too terrible. I mean, that's a lot better than what he was looking like over here in the last chamber. And now we've got our large T-pin kind of protected by those 2 guys. And remember, this is going to be a really high lift. These not so much. And so when I go to shape those key pins, I'm going to keep the I'm going to keep the key pins that are hitting our big steep tapered guys. I'm going to keep them pretty much untouched. They're going to stay fairly standard. These two I can play with. So I may reduce their diameter or put a little serration or something on them just in case, so if they do overlift when trying to get to this one, they catch the shear line. We've got some other decisions in here we've really got to make about as far as how we're going to try to solve this problem. So let's figure that out. Okay, so after some trial and error, I dug this guy out of the just pile of crappy keys I've got, and he actually kind of works out all right. And I had to do a little bit of digging for key pins. But he is sitting almost right there where we wanted. And we've got a couple guys that are sticking up a bit. We can adjust that. We can make those adjustments to the key maybe, or we can do the sketchier adjusting the thing. Now, let's see what happens if we try to load it up. This will tell you how much slop there actually is on these Defiants. It jams up there, sort of, but it's just a snag. I mean, you can see it does actually turn. And if we pull this sucker out again, and look at where 4 is sitting, and even 2, and yet it still gets in there, and it still turns. I mean, that is how much slack these guys have. I was really expecting him not to get in there. So anyway, that looks pretty promising. So we're going to do what we just did a moment ago, and we're going to retract the key. We'll make sure these guys are fully seated. I'm just going to give them a little tap. And let's load it up. This guy's going to be not going to be ideal for us, but I think our other 3 chambers, and that's where the real challenge is happening. I think that's going to work out for us. So let's see what it looks like. Okay, so we've got something like that, and that's a good bit better. I mean, this guy's not. It'd be nice if he was going in a little bit further. I can live with that. I think what we'll do, this is our big long T-pin, and I think just to get him down in there some, we will put him in and we will grind him down a little bit. Because I would rather him sit deeper and be a little shorter than be wiggly and that long. This guy is pretty much right in there. If you want to see what they look like swapped, he gets down in there better. But this pin is a fairly complicated pin. And, yeah, maybe we've got some room to take a hair off of him and get him to drop down in there just a fraction more. So our other, we've only got 4 of our drivers up here, kind of tentatively loaded. I think given the depth of this 4th chamber, we may nix the plan to use our little spool. Maybe we'll just load a standard in there, taper him a little bit. Just put a standard in there for the most part. I think that's going to be the plan. So what I'm going to do now that we've got a key and we've got a tentative, we'll call it a tentative bitting and placement, is up here. I'm just going to line them up as I plan for them to go. And there we go. That is going to be, so we can get their kind of tentative order. So what do we have to do? Well, I want to shave a little bit off of him. I just want to get him sitting in there. If I could get him to sit on the lip of the unmodified part, that would be kind of awesome. This guy is so tiny, I'm leaving him standard. I could probably get him in the chuck and get a single serration cut on him. But honestly, you know what? With my finger and stuff, I think I'd rather just it's going to be hard to chuck him up anyway, even with a working thumb. This guy we're going to leave standard. We might try to come in and put a serration on him towards the end. This guy we want to have a pretty good chance to overset, so we will come in, and we don't have to worry about one of these reductions snagging with him, because we've got, that's still fairly standard, just has the spool element in it. So we'll do some shaping on the top of him, which hopefully will let him get up and get overset and stay overset fairly easily. We've got this standard combination here, so what we'll do is the same thing with this key pin. We will make some modifications because he's really sitting up pretty high. So hopefully we can get an overset snag out of him. So one of these of these two, I will probably reduce just a hair, and the other one I won't. And then I'll put a serration on both of them. And this guy, I'm thinking we'll probably, we'll stick a serration on him, maybe. See what happens. So I've mentioned I do very little core modification, and that's going to hold true for this. We're going to leave it largely standard. But what I want to do on chamber 4, because that's where our most standard pins are going to be, and I want them to have at least a chance to get down in there. Now we've got pretty sloppy tolerances anyway, so I'm not too worried about throwing things off. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a jewelry file, and this one's just kind of flatly oval shaped, so it's slightly rounded. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to hit the edge of chamber 4, and I'm just going to go around it like that. And I have no idea if this is going to make a difference or not. What I'm hoping to do is just to wear down and take a little bit of that sharp lip off, so that that lip is just a bit softer. And you know, I would call it a funnel shape, but it's not that pronounced. I mean, really, we're just taking the edge off of the shear line there. But hopefully that little bit could be enough to encourage him to slip back down, because the pins tend to want to catch more on sharp things, hence serrations and threading. But we don't want that. We don't want him to catch. I don't want to take too much off either, because I don't want to create more of a shelf for him to sit on. So really what I'm hoping is this just kind of, I don't know, some wear and tear or something simulates. Just take a little bit of that off. I don't know if this is actually going to do any good or be noticeable if I didn't do it. But it doesn't take very much to do, so why not? Worth the effort, right? Yeah, that's looking pretty good. It's not going to be very even. There's probably a better way to do it. I used to try to come in with these guys to kind of soften those edges up. It just doesn't work very well. I've got another one that's smaller too. I find it more like bores it out as opposed to doing what I want it to do. Okay, so I'm about to start work on the key pin number 4, and this is the one that's going to be matched up to a standard driver that does not have to be lifted very high. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to very slightly reduce it a little bit, and then I'm going to come in and cut a good serration on there, and hope that's enough to get hung up. Pin 3 I might play with a little bit as well. We'll see what we get here. I'm just using a jewelry file because I'm really not planning to take very much off of this. go. And you know what? We'll use the jewelry saw. New little play toy. Gorgeous. But that will all be in the next part, I think. So, all right, guys, see you then.